Welcome to Jovas Tech Solutions, your trusted partner in precision woodworking machinery.
I've been wanting to try some Tambour doors, except something a little more modern than the roll-top cupboard that you're probably a little more familiar with. Specifically, I remember seeing Aaron Port's credenza, and for the last few years I've been really wanting to get on that level. Using veneer for a tambour, however, is not as easy as it sounds, because as we know, wood moves. Thankfully, however, that wood movement is actually pretty predictable. Both grain direction and the morning are great predictors of wood movement. My concern here is more so that the movement is even from the front to the back of the door. The amount of movement is almost negligible here, given the width of the individual tambour slats, and this mostly falls in the better safe than sorry category. People ask me a lot of questions. Roughly 12.35% of those questions have to do with the bandsaw, and I think it's because the bandsaw is just sort of weird. They seem to be sort of a pain for everybody to set up, and they don't really work that well until suddenly they do. And something about bandsaws is just difficult to intuit. One area in which I have always struggled with the bandsaw is cutting veneers. The secret to a perfect veneer of a consistent thickness is simply consistent pressure in the same direction throughout the cut. On a 14-inch saw, this takes some patience, almost meditation to get right. And after a couple of years of producing really wavy, crappy veneers, I finally picked up this COMATIC power feeder, and let me tell you, there's a few game changers in the wood shop, but a power feeder for veneer, that's a game changer. It's also what I might call a blade changer. Forcing an inconsistent density at a consistent rate comes at a price, but what doesn't? If I was you, I'd be sitting here thinking, this looks nothing like a tambour door. To which I would reply, sarcastically, you're right. It's interesting how little I paid attention to the grain in most furniture until I started building furniture, and now it's kind of all I pay attention to. I'll admit, work smarter, not harder should definitely never come out of my mouth. But this sort of is that instance. Veneering each one of the slats individually would have been a huge pain, so by doing it all in one panel for 4 panels or 288 slats, I'm effectively killing 288 birds with one stone. 4 stones. You know what I'm saying. Now I can begin to clean up these panels and then to chop them up. Let's make part of the tambour that actually rides in the track and cut that out. This cut has a high risk of tearing out. In the process of making that notch or rabbit rebate for my homies across the pond, I take a light scoring pass with my marking gauge just to encourage those fibers to break off at that point. Now this can be done a number of ways, but I've really been liking using the router table setup for the Panto router. In order to ensure the cut is as clean as possible, the first pass is super light and done against the rotation of the cutter on the pattern side of the panels. This is known as a climb cut and typically not something I would recommend doing, but because I'm taking off such little material, I'm able to do so safely. Once that very light climb pass is taken, I can go ahead and hog out the rest of the notch without fear of ruining what I've done so far. Obviously, taking these into 288 different pieces is going to be difficult to keep them in order, so to make sure that I'm not mixing and matching and that they stay in the pattern that I have put them in, I just draw a big old triangle in the back with 1, 2, 3, or 4 lines, and that makes sure that once they're put into little tiny slats that I can visually see that they're in order quickly without having to continue double checking myself. I'll temporarily affix these together using tape. This will kind of act as a temporary hinge. In order to get them into their track, I need to actually pull this apart and continue the track that we didn't quite find daylight with in the last video. If you're interested in seeing that in depth and you haven't already, I'll link part 2, the sunburst raindrops, in the description below. Things don't usually fit as expected or intended at first. Fit and finesse, at least from my perspective, is really what sets one piece apart from another. It's all about the little details. But I don't expect things to work great at first. I didn't really expect them to work this poorly. Most tambours are like NASCAR. They make one turn. Since the curve in this is an S, the segments of the tambour were binding on the hinge in the back for the concave portion and then gapped for the convex portion. This gave me one of 2 options: gap everywhere or gap nowhere. Instead of trying to figure out what that funky angle is, I just measured the gap, divided that in half, and set up the saw to cut each side of every slat up to the convex portion of the panel. If I had to summarize this entire build without using any swear words, it would be repetition and problem solving. 2 of actually kind of my favorite things. And I've really enjoyed being able to sort of nerd out on all the details for these first 3 episodes. While I recognize that the technicals probably appeal to a smaller group of people, I know personally I enjoy watching people get technical in whatever they're really good at. So give me some feedback down in the comments. I'm genuinely curious if you like this series or if you'd rather just see the high level all at one whack and a little bit simpler projects at a little more consistent of an upload schedule. I appreciate everybody's thoughts. Super tidy. We can go ahead and get the backing on. For this, I'm going to be using a little bit of duck canvas and a flexible Tight Bond 1, just general white polyvinyl acetate or whatever PVA glue as an adhesive. To make sure the glue doesn't seep down between the cracks, I've just devised sort of a little clamping method with wedges. And the duck cloth is cut just a little bit oversized and put into the vacuum bag. Once that comes out, I'll go ahead and get that trimmed down and we'll see how it looks. I intentionally didn't leave these in the bag long enough to actually dry, just to make sure if there was a little bit in between the slats, I wasn't actually gluing them back together. And you can see they did get a little bit sticky there, so pull them out of the bag and let them dry vertically. And there you have it, Sunrise Tambour.